anniversary. So 3 pastors go to a pastor convention, and they have to share a room. They're sharing a room together. One pastor says, I have an idea. Let's confess our sins to each other. We're on vacation, right? Let's just get it out. There's nobody we can share this with. So the other pastor says, it's a great idea. I've wanted to get this off my chest for a while. I just love to gamble. And when I'm out of town, cha-ching, cha-ching, let the machines ring, he says. Another pastor, my secret is I hate sermons, so I just steal them off the internet from other pastors. I go to rabbi.com and I steal them from Rabbi B, and it's not my thing. And I'm just saying I have to confess this. The one whose idea this was says, I hate to tell you this, I have a confession to make too. I'm a yenta. I love to gossip. I just can't help myself, right? So I like that because everybody needs to confess, even pastors, even rabbis. In Judaism, we do have confession. We don't have a confessional booth, but we have this idea of confession. I've kind of turned this pulpit into my confessional, for better, for worse. Some of you think for worse. I think for better. I think honesty is important. I came out of the closet a long time ago. I'm a Republican. I shared that with you, and we've had a couple interventions since then, a couple of you trying to intervene to get me to change. I was born this way. It's not a choice. It's who I am. I'm comfortable with it now. It's still kind of scary to say in front of a bunch of Jews, but I did it. I confessed a while back that I have shoe issues. I like to go spend time at Marshall's and spend my money in the shoe aisle. I just like nice shoes. I can't help it. You all know that I'm a Starbucks and Apple Macintosh fanatic, right? That's old news. And you also know this one, but you're going to hear it again, because I just can't help it. I'm obsessed with Malcolm Gladwell. I love the guy. If there was a support group for Malcolm Gladwell addicts, I would be in it. I love The Tipping Point, his book. I love Blink. I love What the Dog Saw. And I love, most of all, Outliers. You know this. I don't have to confess it. How do you know? Because I've given 20 sermons on outliers, so consider this number 21. I just reread the book. I adore Outliers, particularly chapter 5. If you haven't read any of his books, and you haven't read Outliers, at least read chapter 5 in Outliers, because it changed my life. It really did. This is a chapter about Jewish lawyers. Jacob or Ethan mentioned a lot of Jewish lawyers. Well, there are. And if you wanted the best of the best lawyers in the 1960s, you would go to New York City. And in New York City, invariably, if you had litigation to do, you would end up at a Jewish law firm with Jewish lawyers representing you because they were the best of the best. Not because they were smarter, not because they were better, but because of circumstances, lots of circumstances that Gladwell points out in this book. Times only allowed for Jews to get into a certain type of law. The world was changing. Nobody wanted to do litigation. A lot of factors led to the Jews being at the right place at the right time to excel in this one particular area, and excel they did. Gladwell points out that there's another common denominator that these Jewish lawyers had. They did a study. It was a family tree. They created family trees for these Jewish lawyers. But instead of putting names, they put in occupations. So you had lawyer, doctor, lawyer in New York City in the 1960s. And the step up above that, the parents, or at least the grandparents, they found were all Jewish immigrants. And mostly were seamstresses and tailors. Some merchants, some push cart peddlers who peddled their wares. But almost all of them had Jewish immigrant for parents, and again, tailors and seamstresses and hardworking men and women who came to this country and passed on an incredible work ethic. In no small measure, creating another generation of lawyer, doctor, doctor. Over and over, they found the same pattern. Again, not because Jews are smarter and not because they're better, but because that particular generation came to this country in the early 20th century to serve. And that was my conversation a couple weeks ago. The great service of men and women, particularly as Jews, for us, our grandparents or our great-grandparents' generation, the Jewish immigrants, or their children, many of you, the greatest generation that once again came and served in World War II defending your country. Again, that was a talk 2 weeks ago. You can listen to it. I'm not going to repeat it. You can listen to it some other time. I do want to pick up on this idea, though, because it's an important idea, this idea of service, this idea of giving. Because as you read in this week's Torah portion, this is the antithesis of giving. We read about a guy named Korah who takes, right? If you look at these personalities in the Torah, in many ways they're archetypes. They're representations of humanity, of all of us. We all have a piece of Korah. We all have a piece of Moses. Moses was known for the opposite of Korah. Korah was a taker, and Moses was a giver. Literally, Moshe means to draw forth. This is a man who gave people life, who drew them forth out of Egypt, who drew them forth out of their fearfulness and helped them journey towards the land of Israel. This was a man who spent his entire life giving and serving. And this week's Torah portion, we have the opposite. We have Korah. This week's Torah portion begins with the words, Vayikach Korah, right? What does that mean? And Korah took. The simple reading is that he took men. It says he took men and he rebelled against Moses. He took men to his side and convinced them that he was the right leader. And there was a rebellion, there was a riot, and he almost destroyed the camp. Some rabbis say, what is it that he took? He took advantage of a precarious moment in our people's history. When we read about the spies last week, and the Israelites are about ready to run back to Egypt. They're scared, they're terrified, there's panic, and this Korah stepped in and took advantage of the vulnerability of the Israelites. Some rabbis say, what did he take? He took deceptive measures. He used a legitimate kind of a conversation and argument, say the rabbis. This is a midrash. He started debating and dialoguing with Moses about whether or not you have to wear the fringes on the corner of a particular type of garment. It was a legitimate conversation, said the rabbis, but he was using it not as a dialogue like the boys pointed out, but as a monologue. He was using it as a pretext to pick a fight. Rashi says, what does it mean, Vayikach Korah, that he took? It says he took himself to the side. He separated himself. When you read about the 4 children at the Passover Seder, what's the wicked child do? He doesn't do anything explicitly evil or bad. What does he do? He takes himself out of the conversation. That's the beginning of evil. That's the beginning of destruction, of not seeing ourselves as part of the family, as part of the community. Korah took himself aside. But my favorite teaching was shared with me at Starbucks, once again a confession, where I usually hang out taking confessional. By the way, a lot of other people's confessional happens at Starbucks. A friend of mine, and a teacher in many ways, Rabbi Yossi Lipsker down the street at Chabad, just came up to me out of the blue, and it sparked this conversation. He said, Baruch, you know what Vayikach Moshe, or Vayikach Korah means? And Korah took? It means he took. He said there are givers and there are takers, and givers give and takers take. To be fair, he got that from a Hasidic rabbi who taught him, and he taught me, and this is how Torah works. But it's a beautiful idea. Rabbi Yossi is right. In life, there are givers and there are takers. Givers give and takers take. It's a very simple message. Doesn't mean it's simplistic. It means it's simple. And we all know this, but we have to read about it time and time again. I read about it. I reread about it when I was rereading a story to my kids, which many of you, most of you, are familiar with. Almost as holy as Malcolm Gladwell in the Jewish tradition is Shel Silverstein, right? Reb Shel Silverstein, and the most famous of all of his works, The Giving Tree. And I was reading this, as I often do, a little bit uncomfortable with the message of the giving tree. Maybe a different era, it made more sense, but you read it in today's kind of worldview, and you can't help but cringe a little bit. On the one hand, it's beautiful. There's a little boy and a tree that loves him. And what does the little boy do? He takes from the tree. He wants a swing. The tree says, fine, I'll give you a swing. And he takes the swing and puts it up. Then he wants apples, and the tree says, I love you. I'll give you the apples, and he takes all the apples. Then the boy says he wants branches to play on and later to use to build, and the tree says, here you go, and gives, and the boy takes. And finally, the boy wants to make a house, and he chops the tree down. You know the story. And here's what happens at the very last part of the book. At the end of the boy's life, when he's no longer a boy, he's an old man about to die, and the tree is no longer a full tree, it's only a stump. And after a long time, the boy came back. "I'm sorry, boy," said the tree. "I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone." "It's okay," says the boy. "My teeth are too weak for apples." "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I'm too old to swing on branches," said the boy, who was really an old man. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb on it anymore." "I'm too tired to climb," said the boy. "I'm sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I'm just an old stump." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I'm very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could. "Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down. Sit and rest." And the boy did, and he took one last time, and the tree was happy. Now, on the one hand, well, it's clearly problematic that this is a boy who just takes and he takes and he takes. But the other message, I think, is problematic. Yeah, it's important to give. It is important to serve. But the problem is we operate with the worldview. If giving a little bit is good, then giving a lot is great, then giving everything is what we're here to do, to give everything that we have, to give everything that we are, to the point where there's nothing left, to the point where all we are is a stump. That is a problematic message to be telling children. Don't you, when you read this, kind of want the tree to say, "No, you can't have all my apples. You can either have apple pie or you can have applesauce, but you ain't getting both," right? You can have some of the branches, but not all the branches, and stay away from my trunk. That's who I am. You can't have that. You want the tree to stand up and say no. But the message of the book is saying no is wrong. Giving is the only way. Taking is bad, and giving is good. It's a problematic message. It's a message that the author of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, told us about years ago. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to take, and a time to give. They both have their place. They both have their purpose. Sometimes giving is loving, but sometimes giving is the antithesis of loving. We all have either been children or know children or have children, and you know that when they're toddlers, unlike Jacob and Ethan, they just want to take, right? These were perfect boys. But other than Jacob and Ethan, they just are little taker creatures. Gimme, 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 take. If we gave them everything they wanted all the time, we would ruin them. We would destroy them. Saying no is as loving as saying yes. What about a teenager who demands a car from us, who hasn't earned it, who's working towards it, right? We just give without any kind of qualification. We ruin our children. We don't make them better by giving to them what they want. The same is true with adults, whether it's a spouse or sibling or a parent if you're an adult child or a friend or a coworker. What happens when people make demands on us, expecting us to give? Demanding that we give, but we don't want to give. It's not our turn to give. It's not our time to give. And we give anyways. You know what that's called? That's not called giving. That's called giving in. That's called giving up. That's called giving over. That's called giving out. That's the giving up tree. That's not the giving tree. That's not what it means to give. You know, in next week's Torah portion, Moshe burns out. And I was just looking as I was getting ready for this. What does it say before he hits the rock, before he ends his journey to Israel, totally burnt out, in frustration, resentful of having given and given and given time again? Vayikach Moshe et hamateh, and Moses took his staff and he hits the rock to ask for water, and he's angry. He's lost it. Why? Because people who spend their life only giving and never taking end up like Moshe, angry, resentful, and burnt out. I see it all the time with what I call tikkun olamniks, people who spend their life running around fixing the world. A mitzvah, don't misunderstand me. We are not here to just take. We are here to give to the world, to fix the world. But tikkun olamniks oftentimes are so busy fixing other people's worlds that their world is quickly falling apart. As they're busily helping other people, their own homes need a little bit of tending to, need a little bit of work. Giving isn't giving out or giving up or giving over. There is a time to give and there is a time to take. There's nothing wrong with an infant taking milk from its mother, demanding milk. That's how it stays alive. There's nothing wrong in the Holocaust when somebody who was trying to survive stole bread from a bakery, or you read about the partisans who stole chickens or cows from the non-Jewish peasants, right? They took without asking. Was it right? Of course it was right. Everything was taken for them. They had to stand up for themselves and survive. Sometimes you got to give. Sometimes you have to take. My son, years back, maybe 8 years ago, was on the playground, as little kids are wont to do. One kid came up and just took something from him. I think it was a communal toy. It wasn't his, it wasn't theirs. He just took it. My son looked at me with that look of, come, help me, do something. And my response to him was, take it back. You have every right to take what is rightfully yours. You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to enter a dialogue. You have every right at times in life to give, and you have every right to take. And yeah, they were the greatest generation, World War II. But they went and they took lives. Thank God to preserve lives, the lives of Jews, the lives of Americans. They pushed back the Japanese in the Pacific. They took the lives of Nazis. We don't begrudge that as Jews, as Americans. If it weren't for the great men and women of World War II, many of us wouldn't be here today, right? There's a time to give and a time to take. My great-grandfather, who came to this country, like many of yours, like chapter 5 of Outliers, they gave, and they gave tremendously. But my great-grandfather came over here to take his slice of the pie, to be a part of the golden Medina, of the golden land. He had every right to come to a new country, to expect to prosper, and to give, but also to take. We need to have a healthy balance of both. The problem is books like The Giving Tree and the mixed messages of religion and parents oftentimes is it's only good to give and it's never right to take. I'll end with this, and you can actually have this as an exercise. You don't have to look at it now, but on this, I always call it yellow, but I'm always corrected afterwards, it's goldenrod. On your goldenrod color sheet, right, there's a little 2 phrases on the back you'll look later. The great Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pushishka used to have an exercise. He used to carry around 2 pieces of paper in his pockets. In one front pocket were written the words, Va'anochi afar ve'afar, I am but ashes and dust. And on the other piece of paper, in the other pocket, it said, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, that the world was created for me. And what did he say? That there are times to reach into one pocket and remind yourself that you are the center of the world and you have every right to stand up for yourself and not only to give but to take. And there are other times when you have to realize, but you're ashes and dust and you're only a part of humanity and you're only a part of existence, and it's time to stop taking. It's time to give. The secret of joy and joy in this life, says the great Rabbi, is to know when to reach in to a pocket, which pocket to draw from, and which one to live out. There are times to give, and when it's ours to give, we should give it and give it completely, and there are times to take. And when it is ours to take, we have every right, we have a duty, it is even a mitzvah, to stand up for ourselves, to make room for ourselves, to make ourselves a priority, and to ultimately take. It's about giving, it's about taking.